This is Horror Podcast.
Welcome to This is Horror, a podcast for readers, writers, and creators. I'm Michael David Wilson, and every episode alongside my co-host Bob Pastorella, we chat with the world's best writers about writing, life lessons, creativity, and much more. Today we are talking to Jason Pargin about writing about pop culture references in film and fiction, amongst other things. Now, Jason Pargin is the New York Times best-selling author of John Dies at the End and the Zoe Ash series. He's the former editor of Crack.com, and his most recent book is I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom, which is currently, for the month of June only, at a very special price on Kindle, so head over to Amazon and get that for a bargain price right now. Before we talk to Jason, a quick advert break.
What if the end of the world didn't come with a bang, but with a breach? In the Infernal Age, Demongate, a failed experiment destroys all technology, killing millions, and opens a gateway to something far worse. Demons now roam the earth, and humanity's only hope lies in adapting to the ashes of a broken world. If you love the creeping dread of the mist, the poignant grit of the road, and the dark humor of the cabin in the woods, you'll feel right at home in this post-apocalyptic blend of horror and sci-fi. The Infernal Age, Demongate, is available now on Amazon, Audible, and bookshop.org. Step to the gate, if you dare.
Cosmovorous, the debut cosmic horror novel by R.C. Housen, is now available as an audio experience. Featuring an original dark synthwave score, this story will take you to the next level of terror. Come hear the story that readers are calling Barker Meets Lovecraft, a phantasm-style cosmic horror adventure, and a full-bore, unflinching, nihilistic nightmare. Cosmovorous, the audiobook by R.C. Housen. Come listen if you dare.
All right, well, it is now time for Jason Pargin on This is Horror. Jason, welcome back to This is Horror.
So I normally don't keep up with celebrity news, but right now, as we're starting the show, there's a headline coming across Twitter where Britney Spears the police were called on her because on a private jet, she tried to light a cigarette. And I think all of us were shocked for the same reason, which is, can you not smoke on a private jet? You paid millions of dollars for a private jet. You seriously cannot light up a cigarette on your own private jet? If I paid that much for a private jet, I better be able to shoot a gun on there and for them to be fine with it.
Yeah, I better be able to shoot heroin on it.
Yeah, I'm stunned that is a crime. And like she refused to put it out. It's like, yeah, I would too. It's a private, like, haven't you seen video of like a basketball team who won the NBA championship and they're on their private flight and they're all like, shoot, they've got cigars and stuff. Did I imagine that?
No.
Can you not smoke on these things?
You did not imagine it. I mean, normally when someone's on a private jet, I feel more often than not there is a cigar. Isn't that part of the experience? You know, you board and then you are passed a cigar and a bottle of champagne. So this is perplexing.
Not trying to start us off on a tangent, but this has been upsetting me because it's like, so you're saying that even if I become like a super famous author, if I write a book that sells like 20 million copies and I can take a private jet to appearances, I don't smoke, but if I decide to, or if my guests want to, it's ridiculous. Anyway, yes, thanks for having me on the show.
Oh my goodness. I wasn't even aware of that. As this came in within the last few hours while in Japan,
Yeah, it's on Twitter. It's
it's
on
on
Twitter right
Twitter,
now.
right?
It's like a big scandal because it's like she's out of control. The conservatorship ended and she's lost her mind. She tried to smoke a cigarette on her private jet. It's like, yeah, I didn't know you couldn't do that either. So I'm sorry. I'm with her on this one.
Yeah.
Wow. I quit smoking and now I want to go on a private jet and smoke. I mean, and I've been doing really, really good, but I'm like, I could do one on a private jet. I could just smoke one. I'd cough really, really bad, but it'd be worth it just to go. What are you going to do? Like make the plane land?
It'd be like if you were in the back of a limo and the limo got pulled over by the cops and the cops were like, "Oh, do you have an open container of alcohol back there, sir?" And like, yeah, it's a limousine. We're all drinking champagne back here. That's why these exist. I don't know. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. I realize that, but
I mean, it's a little bit apropos because we are going to be talking about pop culture references, and well, there's one to begin with. But before we get into that main topic, it's been 8 months since we last spoke to you. You know by now, I always ask you, what has been going on? What have been the biggest things that have happened to you, both personally and professionally, in that time?
well, the schedule with the books coming out is I'm not on a yearly release. People may have that impression because I had a couple of books come out a year apart. I found that in that time, I cannot write a book in 1 year. So I am finishing the first draft of the next book in the John Dies at the End series. It would be the fifth one of those. That is due at the end of this year, which means it's not going to be published until next year around Halloween or October, whenever. These are always fall releases. So fall 2026 is when that comes out because of the glacial pace at which publishing works. I am finishing a draft now in May of 2025. I will spend the next 6 months editing and revising it. I will turn it in. It's due by the end of the year. I'll turn it in right before the holidays, God willing. There's not some crisis in my life. We will spend the first few months of 2026 doing edits and copy edits and formatting and choosing a cover and all of that stuff. And then preview copies will go out to reviewers and influencers in the spring and the summer to try to get reviews and blurbs. And that's the long, multi-year long process of getting a book out into the world. And then once it's out, I will have to do an enormous long press tour of somewhere between 50 and 100 podcast hits and other type interviews, and will struggle to remember what's in the book because it will have been so long since I actually wrote it.
And that's actually pretty relevant to writing pop culture references. I mean, if we think about the lead time from writing the book to it actually coming out, as you say, 1, 2 years have passed. So, how do you ensure, as somebody who includes quite a lot of pop culture, that it kind of feels fresh and relevant rather than being dated, even though by the nature of how it works, it will be dated by the time it's come out?
I try very, very hard to make sure that when I'm including a pop culture reference, that it's already dated when I write it in. Because I've had people ask me, well, like the first John Dies at the End book, there's references to Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit in there. Aren't you worried that the kids today are not going to know who that is? And it's like, okay, but Google exists. And I think if they don't know who that is, and then they stop reading the book and they go Google Fred Durst and watch several of his videos, that now makes my book 10 times funnier than what it was because I have sent them down a rabbit hole of something they may not have known about, or they may only know Fred Durst as this elderly, like uncle type figure and not realize the controversy around Woodstock 99 and all of that. So I don't really worry about that at all. And in fact, include some fairly obscure things because I feel like, especially if you have something that it's clear the way it's written that it is of a specific time and place. When I read old detective novels from the 1970s or books from the C.S. Lewis books or whatever, and I see a reference to music or something that's clearly of the time, and it's like, I don't know what they're referencing there, but I can tell from context that they're comparing this guy to some famous radio host of the era or something that's now long forgotten. I love to go look that stuff up because it's a glimpse into that era, and I feel like they weren't afraid of throwing that stuff in, even though Google didn't exist back then. It was just like, well, the future will figure it out. So I try never to have a situation where like a plot point hinges on you knowing who some obscure comedian was or some pop culture phrase or catchphrase that was going around at the time. But I don't worry about throwing that stuff in because I think, especially if you're of the same age as me, it's fun to see that stuff referenced in. If you're not, I don't know. It's cool to go hunt that stuff down.
See, it wasn't really the takeaway that was intended, but I'm now thinking, I wonder what the young generations think of Fred Durst. Like, what is their perception of him? Because, I mean, if you say Fred Durst, then I picture him in kind of the 90s or maybe the early noughties. But, if you look at him these days, he's got this mop of gray hair that I don't even know, is that his actual hair or is it a wig? And he's got this insane handlebar mustache. It's like he's become a parody of a rapping grandfather. But I don't even know. What do the kids think of Fred Durst?
I don't know if the kids understand any of the stuff that was controversial at the time, but has been around for so long. Like, I'm confident that no one in Gen Z understands that when The Simpsons came out, there was a moral panic around that show. The president came out against The Simpsons because it was so like edgy, and it's animation, but it's so clearly adult, and this family is so dysfunctional, and the father strangles his son. And that this was a huge deal. You were rebellious and cutting edge for watching that show. And now it's, the kids that go back and look it up, because of course that show was canceled, 25 years ago. It's long forgotten. I mean, can you imagine if it was still on? But now it's like, because it's been around so long, it's like South Park. It's so old and toothless. It's an institution. The idea that, and I think the same thing with Eminem, who now is, was he 52 years old? I think he's my age. The idea of him like being the apocalypse and that people are terrified and want to ban the music is ridiculous, because he's this uncle. He's this, his children are old enough to rap themselves. They're in, he has adult children. So I think who these people were in the past is totally lost. Because, and like Snoop Dogg, Snoop does all these appearances with Martha Stewart. He has like a cooking show. He's at the Olympics, and he's just this grandfatherly, this cool uncle, weed smoking uncle. Guys, go listen to that music. Go listen to his first album. You have no idea.
It's funny because like Trent Reznor just turned 60 years old. And,
Jesus.
So we have, and I remember kids back when Nine Inch Nails was first coming out, and they wanted to be what they thought was like Trent Reznor. They wanted to hang out and do nothing. And it's like, dude, you do realize that Trent Reznor, the creator of Nine Inch Nails, is out fucking working right now. He is actually doing something. He is not some slacker that you think that he just comes up with this stuff and just puts it out in 30 minutes. And so he's built this entire career around the work ethic.
Yeah, because he's not just doing albums, he's doing soundtracks. He's doing stuff that you don't even, his name's not even attached to. He's doing anything. He's doing commercials and video game music. He's doing whatever project, will pay him.
Yeah. And that's, I wanted to ask though, because this has come up a lot, and it hasn't come up recently, but it used to come up a lot more in the writing circles. It's like using pop references. Using pop references can the theory that it dates your work. And to me, the most common answer rebuttal to that would be is that every work of fiction is dated. Every story, every flash fiction, every anecdote, every novel, every epic, it's dated. Whether you have pop references or not, you have set this thing into it's etched in stone once it's published. It is dated. The story is dated. Has that ever stopped you, or have you ever thought about that? It's like, man, I'm including way too many pop references, and I should kind of go more generic with the references and stuff. Or do you lean into it?
I think what makes it feel dated is when you have an author trying to reference pop culture that they are not a part of or they're familiar with, where it's like an older author inserting references to whatever YouTube trends or something like that in a way that's derisive and clear that they don't understand it or don't know what it is. And they're kind of trying to either sound cool or they're trying to sound dismissive, but it's not them referencing a thing that they know and love. I think that comes across, especially if it's, if you'll see a sitcom, especially you look back and you'll see, a sitcom where it's like a middle-aged white comedian complaining about this rap music. Well, now there's like no value in that because it's just now rap music is for old white people. It's now it is like the rappers are 70 years old. So that's something that's totally lost, where it's just a guy being cranky about it, because that stuff is going to become mainstream at some point. At some point, like Logan Paul is going to be the president. I think it's inevitable. So I think the one way you can go wrong is if you're talking about something you don't understand. But if I read like an old detective novel and I see them talking about like jazz music, like I know nothing about jazz or blues or any of that stuff, but it's clear they know it and it's clear the character knows it, I love it. Even though I don't know what they're talking about, I can't hear that music in my head, but their love of it, their knowledge of it comes across. And even if it's somebody who's obscure, somebody who I'm never going to listen to, for me, it just adds flavor to it. But I think what people find cringe, as the kids would say, is when somebody is trying to either latch on to phrasing or a pop culture thing that's not their own, or they're revealing that they don't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's like even in horror fiction we find out like Peter Straub uses a lot of jazz references, and he writes so authentically about these jazz references that I have spent hours looking up musicians who did not exist because he made them up, but he wrote so authentically and put them into people who were real. They played, they mixed with this band and so on. That those references, even though I didn't know who they were, obviously to me it dated that story, it dated that character, but it also gave it a sense of authenticity that you don't really see in fiction that avoids any type of references at all. And I just remember someone getting really, really upset, like on a forum or something, saying, "Hey, don't use pop references. That it's going to date your story. I want my stories to be fluid." And I'm like, "Do what? What do you mean? I don't think I could write without any type of pop culture reference or something. I just don't think I could do it."
Let me throw out a really good example for other people out there who are our ages. How old are you guys? Remind me.
So I am 38.
I will be 58 next month.
Okay. People my age grew up watching Bugs Bunny cartoons. So these were not new, but every Saturday morning before school or whatever, this is what they would be, these Bug Bunnies, these old Warner Brothers cartoons. And they were full of references to vaudeville and like big band music and opera stuff that I had no context for what they were referencing, but I could sense what the joke was. They were, because again, like Bugs Bunny chewing on that carrot, that's a Humphrey Bogart reference, I think. Totally went over my head as a child, because by the way, if you have rabbits, don't feed them carrots. They're not supposed to have them. That was something that he's imitating a movie character when he's doing that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't matter. Like everything, the fact, and same thing, early Simpsons, like those writers are referencing all sorts of, like Krusty the Clown, a local show where a clown is hosting a variety show. Kids today don't have that. That is referencing a thing from the 1960s and 1970s. That is referencing Bozo the Clown. That
Mm-hmm.
when you watch it, because the writers are referencing something they love and grew up with, it doesn't matter because that made that character funny. It made that world come alive because they were writing something that they knew, and it becomes timeless, even though the reference is long gone.
Yeah, I remember the one with the little rodents, and it was like there was the honeymooners,
Mhm.
and they had, I don't even think that Mel Blanc, I think he may have done one of the voices, but they had a guy who sounded just like Jackie Gleason, and another guy who sounded just like Art Carney, and they were kind of doing like a honeymooner skit, and I didn't even know who the honeymooners were.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
had never
like,
seen an episode of that show.
and I hadn't either until probably when I was a teenager. They started showing them in the afternoons, and I'm like, "What is this?" I seen that. It's like, man, it's Jackie Gleason. That's the cop from Smokey and the Bandit, the sheriff. And then they start going through these routines, and I'm like, going, man, I remember watching that when I was a kid. But it was mice. It was little mice, Hey, Robbie boy, hey, And so it was just all this really crazy references. And it's like, yeah, that stuff's dated. I didn't get it at the time, but I still found it entertaining.
There's James Cagney references. There's stuff that's all over. All these like mafia movies, crime movies. There's some cartoon version of it that I know for a fact I never in my life ever went back and watched the original. But
Mm-hmm.
as a little kid, I'm sitting there 7 years old laughing my head off. And it's like, no, it's hilarious because that guy talks funny. It's like, yeah, actually, he's talking like James Cagney or whatever.
Yeah, as part of my preparation for this conversation, I went back and read your 2012 release. This book is full of spiders, because I thought, well, since we're talking about pop culture, let's look at how a book is that you wrote over a decade ago. And actually, a lot of the references, and I guess with it being in the John Dies at the End universe, they were very kind of timeless and well known, in the sense that if you think about the media that you're referencing, it's things like Toy Story and G.I. Joe and Alice in Wonderland, Star Trek, Batman. I've got a whole list. The only thing on my list that I hadn't heard of was Anal Therapist 6, which I did think, well, let's Google it. I think he made it up. Regretfully, I couldn't track it down, but yeah.
But that also, it helps that pop culture has totally stagnated, so that when I think about, well, the forgotten pop culture of my youth, like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, those long forgotten franchises that surely the kids today have not heard of. It's like, oh no, studios are still milking all of that stuff for money. So a reference to Star Trek, any of those things, all those franchises are still around. Blade Runner, anything like that. It could be 50 years old. It's like, nah, it's probably still going. It's been rebooted a couple of times. They've changed out the cast, or not. It could still be Harrison Ford at 86 years old playing Indiana Jones as of a couple of years ago. So that does help too, that there was a time when I think, we actually changed out the stuff people watched every couple of decades. And now we just keep bringing it back. So guess what, guys? All references are now timeless. They'll still be doing Skibbity Toilet 50 years from now.
And I mean, I think as well, there seems to be a real revival for nostalgia, and particularly for things from the 80s, when you look at television shows like, most famously, I suppose, Stranger Things. So it seems that people want this. I wonder if some of it is to do with this discontent about the current times that we're living in, that they want to kind of be transported back and forget, the moment that we're in history right now.
It's funny because one of my most popular TikTok videos is asking a question of why, for example, if you watch a TV show that is from the 70s, and that show is about the 50s. It is like it's about a totally bygone era, like an alien land. If you imagine how somebody dressed in the 1960s, you're picturing like a hippie. And then if you imagine how somebody's dressed like the 1950s, you're picturing like Mad Men. They're in a gray suit or whatever. If somebody from the night dressed like the 1960s showed up in a show set in the 1980s, that would be a Halloween costume. Like if a hippie from the 1960s from Woodstock showed up in Stranger Things, you wouldn't think that's just how that person dresses. You would think, oh, they're wearing a costume making fun of that era. But if you watch an episode of a sitcom from 2005, 20 years ago, they're wearing the same thing they're wearing today. And in fact, the only way to tell that it's set in a different era is the technology. Their phones they have the flip phones, and their computer monitors are fat instead of flat screen. But the styles and the hairstyles, it's exactly the same. So the question I was asking was, why do people look the same when you used to be, from one decade to the next, it used to be radically different? And I actually don't necessarily know the answer to that, because Stranger Things set in the 1980s, that's 40 years ago. That is a long enough time ago. But if you had a show that was a period piece set in 2006, that almost wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I think, yeah, there's a few things that have kind of come and go, like maybe flannel shirts, lumberjack shirts used to be more popular kind of 10, 15 years ago, but
But if you
mostly it's
saw somebody wearing one in public, you wouldn't think they were wearing a costume. You wouldn't
right.
think, oh, that person came out of a Halloween party where they did 90s. Like I can find a guy in the fall dressed in a flannel shirt, out there that could be from the stage of a concert that Nirvana was playing. I don't know. I think the nostalgia for the 1980s, it's almost like that's the last era that they think of as being radically different, because the aesthetic of Stranger Things with the brightly colored, the neon clothes or the pastels and the shopping mall, the stuff that they think is stereotypical 80s. As somebody who was there in the 80s, that's not what it looked like. But it's like that's how far back you have to go to find something truly different. Where if Stranger Things took place again in 2005, it would just be like okay, so they don't have smartphones. Like that's the only difference. Otherwise, it just looks like they wouldn't even have to have a costume budget. They could just show up wearing whatever they're wearing. The only thing that might look out of place is the leggings that women wear instead of jeans. But
Most of the time that fashion or music or technology hits general populations, it used to be, and it's probably not so much now, but in the past, it took a long time. I mean, I remember back in 1988, 1989, we used to go to what I guess we'd call a rave or things like that. And they had these clubs that played a lot of postmodern and industrial music, and, Skinny Puppy and bands like that. And if you're hearing this stuff for the first time, you think that it's brand new. And then you come to realize that it's not new at all, that some of it is actually 10 years old. But because you're experiencing it for the first time, you feel like that everything that you experience is a brand new thing. It just takes a long time, I think, for pop stuff in the past, the nostalgia to take on. People in the early 80s dressed like they were in 1977. So that's something that if you go back and look, you'll see that the clothing trends really took about 5 to 6, 7 years before they shifted and everyone started wearing different clothes. But you look in the early 80s and you're seeing clothes from the late 70s, especially in my area, my neck of the woods, where everything was slow back then. It took us forever to get stuff, because they just, Bible Belt conservative Texas. Y'all ain't wearing shorts that short, young lady. You're just not going to go out in the house like that, And it just took a while for things to morph and change. Now, like what you're talking about, I never thought about that. I got people. We haven't changed fashion in 20 years.
I mean,
What
I
the
have
fuck
shirts in my
happened?
closet that are literally 20 years old. They're just,
No.
I don't mean I bought them from the era. I mean, I still have them because not as like a piece of vintage clothing. It's like, well, this didn't have very many holes in it. I can still wear that. But no, and I would say that if you went back and and photographed my childhood home in the 80s, it never looked like the 80s. It was brown paneling. It was brown, like furniture, and that brown paisley, tan paisley, whatever. It was not neon. And that stuff we saw in movies that were set in LA. But the actual 80s presented in Stranger Things, that's a movie set. In terms of what an actual small town in Indiana, I think is where that's set, it never looked like the 80s. The kids were never wearing the neon. My classmates could not afford that. There was like 2 girls that their parents could afford to buy them those clothes. Everybody else was wearing the stuff that, yeah, like you said, would have been the same thing. And when I say from the 1970s, I don't even mean like bell bottoms and fashionable stuff I'm not talking about Saturday Night Fever, because we also couldn't afford that stuff. It's the same jeans and t-shirts and the same jeans and white t-shirt that a guy could have been wearing in 1950, high school student, or 1990, or in 2010, or probably today, and you wouldn't snap your head around to see them, because the whole idea of having like the cutting edge fashion, again, what we were watching in movies and on TV changed. But in terms of what we actually owned, no, it was we looked like the same as we had looked 10 years earlier, because in many cases it was the same clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how quick time goes. And then, like, I've noticed before, like, whoa, this suit jacket I've got is now 15 years old. But it doesn't, if I put that on when I go to work, people aren't like, whoa, is it retro day? There's no kind of batting of eyelids. I think really it might just be a little bit boxier than all my other very similar suit jackets, but that's it.
I also realize there are women, if you have women in your audience listening to this, and we're driving them crazy because they're like, our fashions change nonstop. And in fact, there's entire industries of fast fashion where the thing you were wearing last fall is now ridiculous and you have to throw it out. I'm telling you that if the winter jacket that I bought 10 years ago got a hole in it, and so I went to shop for a new one, it's the exact same ones on the shelf. They have not changed them. It's the exact same one, only it's now made in China instead of like somewhere. It's like slightly cheaper the way it's made, but the style is identical. With men's fashion, they've decided we're just going to wear the same thing forever.
I think as well, like as men, there's a comfort in getting the same item. Like when I've replaced my long black coat with another similar long black coat, I get a bit irritated if I can't find one that's almost identical to the one that I'm replacing. So yeah, there's a comfort in it, and just not wanting to make these choices really, and think about like, oh, should it be this cut or that cut? Just give me the exact one, like Luther in the BBC crime series, where there are shots of his wardrobe and it's literally the same outfit again and again.
Yeah, and that's the dream. Yeah.
Yeah. But you mentioned, this video going viral on TikTok. And of course, since we last spoke, TikTok was banned for about 24 to 48 hours. When that happened, I was thinking about you, because this is one of your big areas of business. This is your livelihood now, this bizarre journey that you've taken where TikTok is responsible for a significant portion of your income. So, I mean, that happening, how did that affect you? How is that affecting you now? Have you had to adjust the way that you're doing business or the way that you're operating on TikTok for fear that something like that might happen again?
I spent 6 straight months and several thousand hours of labor porting the operation over to Facebook, which, believe it or not, is the fastest growing social network now. So I now have 300,000 followers on Facebook. I have another 150,000 on Instagram. I have another 30,000 on Threads, another 60,000 on Twitter. I basically had to, because people don't know, I had like 600,000 followers on TikTok, still do, but they're like a lot of the monetization dried up there because the advertisers thought it was banned, so they left. So like a lot of the ad rates and the payments stuff went down. So I spent half a year and a stupid amount of effort. I do not have a staff. It's just me porting over all of my videos, changing some of the videos to fit their format and their time length and what their algorithm prefers, and moving a lot of my big hit videos and uploading them there. And I applied for monetization and got it. So I now am in a position that I can lose TikTok if I have to. But this has been my whole life since the internet was invented, frankly. I started blogging in the late 90s, and I think the first time the platform I was using, it just went out of business was in like 2000. And I was one day, it's like, oh, they can just do that? They can just delete their entire system? And it turns out, oh yeah, they can, and they don't have to warn you. So my life has been a series of hopping from this platform to, I blogged on Blogger for a while, and then on WordPress, and then I had my own server for a while, and then they invented social media, and I had a MySpace space for a while that played the music, and I did the formatting, and then that died, and then I had Facebook, and then Twitter, and then you just hop from thing to thing. It's like I compare it to those levels on Mario where you're running along a bridge and it's disappearing behind you, and you can't stop running because it's crumbling, and so you just keep going. So the platforms I'm on now, at some point, those will also go away. I started a YouTube account. I have like 12,000 followers there. I've applied for monetization. If those other things die, I like to think YouTube will still exist. And at some point, a year from now, they'll invent some new goddamn thing, and I'll have to go on there, and they will want a different format of videos of a different length, maybe with a different camera, and then I'll have to do that. And that probably will be what I have to do until I finally just get exhausted and fall over and die.
Yeah, wow. Unbelievable that so many people are kind of going back to Facebook, but it seems that everything else has got so just fragmented and chaotic that Facebook is the thing that people are going back to. It's honestly making me wonder. I got rid of my Facebook account 3 years ago now, but the more people say Facebook is the one working for them, it's like, am I going to be roped in? I think I might have to rejoin.
What they did was they pivoted to video, and they launched Reels, which is their vertical video thing. And they just, because they're still the biggest and have always been the biggest, they can just, the advertisers stay there and the big celebrities stay there. And there's a lot of it's mostly, I think, extreme right-wing cranks or whatever, but that's where the audience is. And the audience to TikTok has been steadily going down. It getting banned has not helped, but Facebook has not. Facebook has maintained their position, which I think that's where it helps to have $1 trillion or however much that company is worth. But no, I gave Facebook up for dead years ago. I thought there was a point where it was just like an old folks home for the elderly to share memes about how vaccines are bad or whatever. I used to never check it. But when TikTok got banned briefly, and by the way, it is still absolutely banned. It's just this zombie platform because Donald Trump wrote an executive order telling the Justice Department not to arrest anybody, even though it is absolutely against the law to run TikTok. It is on the books. It is in violation of federal law. He just wrote an executive order saying, yeah, just don't prosecute. That is not how the law works whatsoever. That has never been how it works, but it's just out there. So at any moment they could turn it off. So I just went around and looked up well, where do you go? And Instagram does not pay creators, but it's also very big, but that's just Facebook. So it basically, Facebook rewards you if you post on Instagram and you link your accounts, they'll feed both of them. So I just kept focusing on posting to those and watching those analytics instead of TikToks. And I know that this is all very boring hearing me talk about the business of running a social media promotion operation just to get people to buy my books. But this is the business of writing books. Your job is not to write the books. Your job is to sell the books. Writing the books is the easy thing you do on the side. Getting people to pay money for your book, that's the other 99% of the effort. To be clear, it's also very, very hard to write a book. Writing the book, you're just 1% of the way to being someone who can write books full time, because the other 99% is now trying to convince a bunch of strangers, one, to read something that's 100 and some thousand words long, but also to pay money for it. That is a difficult task.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, when you went back to Facebook, maybe there are some listeners that are like, for fuck's sake, he's still talking about. No, I want to know, did you reactivate an old account, or did you literally start from scratch?
No, I had an account from that I signed up for forever ago. It's under my name, and I just occasionally would go in there and post updates just to keep it alive. It's the same reason why I had a YouTube channel that had no videos on it, but I had started that account forever ago. I have accounts that I've started on basically all of these obscure platforms that I never post to. Just I'll go there to reserve my username so that nobody else can steal it, because I'm basically Jason Pargin or Jason K. Pargin anywhere. And just I keep those contacts warm for in case I have to flee there at some point in the future. And see, that's the thing, is I didn't do that with TikTok. When TikTok came along years and years ago, and it was like, it's this platform where it's teenage girls lip syncing to songs, I was like, no, that's it. This is where I'm stopping. I agreed to do stupid Twitter. I agreed to do Facebook. I agreed to do all of these other, I'm not doing this TikTok dance stuff. And I was very slow to get onto that. And I had to be basically dragged by friends and colleagues onto that platform just in 2022. I joined it late when it was already on the decline. And that became the biggest platform I'd ever had. Because again, for people who don't know, like the audience I built on TikTok, that's a bigger audience than I've had for anything else I've done combined. All of my books, all of my articles at Cracked, all of the podcasts I've showed up on, nothing has been like what happened with TikTok. So now that I'm like, when I go to Facebook, it's the same video operation that I was doing with TikTok. I'm just uploading them there on their Reels platform. And in general, Facebook has made their system the last few years very video friendly because they were trying to compete with TikTok. And now they're going to win because, again, the origin of this TikTok ban is Mark Zuckerberg lobbied Congress saying, hey, you should ban my competitor. And they said, sure, in exchange for some very large donations to our campaigns, we will ban this evil corporation that is doing the exact same thing you're doing. But what else can you do? So now I have joined Mark Zuckerberg's evil campaign to dominate the space because that's where my readers are. I am trying to reach people, and in between me and my readers are these platforms. It's either one or the other. I can go through Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or the communist Chinese government. Pick your evil platform owner. They're all standing in between me and my readers.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned them, and it seems like surely there's an opportunity for Jeff Bezos to also launch his social media.
Yes, the worst
platform.
One yet.
I know.
Yes, the most addictive, most ruthless platform yet. You know he's out there. He's got to have it in mind. It's going to be the most soulless. It's going to use AI, and it'll read your thoughts. It's going to be a nightmare. And I will be, as soon as he launches it, I will reserve the Jason K. Pargin username because this is it. You have to go through somebody. I don't have the billions of dollars it costs to build my own social media platform. I had somebody send me an angry piece of email months ago saying, because they're complaining that I spend so much of my time like making videos on TikTok. Like, a good literature will sell itself. Like, you should just focus on writing books. It's like, no, it won't. I'm telling you, it won't. Herman Melville had to have a day job his whole life because Moby Dick sold 3,000 copies while he was alive. It didn't become a mega seller classic until he was dead. He worked as a clerk in an office after the book. The book came and went, and critics were like, "Yeah, if you like whale stuff, it's fine." Like, no, it did not sell itself. It became fashionable decades later because academics and people started to talk about it, and it became fashionable to read Moby Dick. But he did not reap the benefits of that.
No, there's a lot of people that get on social media now that, like, no matter what platform you have, there's going to be like bad people, and you get somebody who posts on that they make a post on Substack, and then there's always going to be some randos like, hey, Substack, caters to Nazis. Every social media platform caters to Nazis.
Yeah,
unfortunately, it fucking sucks. You're going to have to learn how to navigate around it. That doesn't mean that I'm a Nazi or Michael's a Nazi or even Jason's a Nazi. Matter of fact, I'm pretty confident that none of it here are actually Nazis.
No, but every alternative they suggest, it's like, okay, give me 5 minutes, I'll find you a Nazi on here. I'm telling you right now, you can't. There's nobody that polices it that tightly. Because again, I used to run it. I used to use WordPress. Like, you tell me there's not some neo-Nazi running a WordPress blog out there. I guarantee you, it's just that's not the way it works. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like some social media purity test that we have to jump hurdles through, and it's like, I would love to go back to Facebook. I don't think I can though. I don't think because I got banned from there. I had an account. I deactivated. I reactivated it, and I never posted anything on it for months. I never did anything. And so now I think there's like maybe 20 days left for me to appeal that I'm an actual human being. When Facebook actually will give me an AI friend, but I have to prove that I'm fucking real. So, to me, that's I don't know, that's probably the reason why isn't Pastorella on Facebook? Well,
I'm telling you right now, if you try to get through to their customer service for help, you're not gonna reach anybody. You would think $1 trillion company would have somebody you could get on the phone and walk through getting your account back. No, I can promise you you will never talk to a person. Because I've had a large account with money at stake. I can't get anybody even on email if something goes wrong. They've got like some self-help thing, and that if you click on it, it's just going to be a 404 error. All of these companies, there's nobody running them. It's just a series of algorithms and software. There's nobody at the helm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I presume if I went back to Facebook, it would be kind of the public "This is horror" page. I might be dating myself, and you're like, what? There's no public and private page anymore. Like, I don't know, because it's been 3 years since it happened, but I'm assuming I could just log back into that. My previous private page, that's presumably no good, but yeah, the fan page, as it were.
Yeah, it's if you can remember your passwords, I'm telling you, anybody out there, if you're worried about the platform you're on going away, Facebook still exists. Any of those, keep them active if you're in this line of work. If you've got a podcast, if you've got a band, anything like that, and you think that Facebook is from 10 years ago, that's true. But they've come back, and they apparently will be the survivor after these other ones die. Or at least for a while, but this is the nature of it. If you're having to promote yourself, if you're not a superstar that has a team of people to promote for you, this is the life. You have to stay on top of where the people are and which platforms are active. It's an absurd amount of your time and energy that goes into this part of it. I hate to say. I'm not happy about it. Nobody's happy about it. Again, nobody wants this for their life, but it is. If you do not have, money to buy an ad during the Super Bowl, the only other way to reach this number of people, this is how. You have to donate an absurd amount of your time to one of these platforms, or in my case, all of them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I thought I was being efficient getting off Facebook, But what's the reality now? The reality is that I put something on X, I put it on Blue Sky, I put it on Threads. I'm just copy and pasting everything, changing if I've tagged somebody to their unique username for that. So I might as well at least add Facebook back into the mix. So stand by, everyone. 3 years later, oh, this is horror back. But I, I mean, I don't think, I don't have such a platform that I need to make a fanfare about here. Hey, fireworks going off. I'll just start posting as if I put something up yesterday, and we'll see if anybody engages with it.
Yeah, and again, this is even if you're not in the business, I think this is relevant to everybody listening to this because in general, there's so much stuff out there in terms of things people can be playing or watching or listening to. Trying to find the stuff that's your stuff, the things that will connect to you, is kind of a nightmare. And for example, all of my friends have podcasts. I am friends with many people who make their living with podcasts. So even if they're not rich off of it, they can pay the bills with it. But the process of trying to find new listeners with a podcast, kind of a nightmare. The platforms don't make it easy. They like to promote the same few gigantic names at the top, and occasionally you'll be like, we're going to push Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro and Theo Vaughn and these guys like that. And then occasionally a superstar celebrity will enter the space, and now they're all pushing Conan O'Brien's show, and you're competing with that. So I sympathize with you and everybody in your space because none of the platforms make it easy for somebody who's kind of I'm not saying you're a nobody, but you're not an existing celebrity and you're trying to put your show out there. The platforms and like Spotify, they don't do a good job of pushing your show out to people who may like it. It's just not, it's not kind of the way it works. So you wind up having to go out and try to find people on social media or whatever. And I think some fans wonder, like, well, why do you bother? Why do you spend so much time doing that part of it? Just may focus on making the show good. I'm telling you, that's not enough. The platforms where you're putting the show up on, like, episodes don't go viral on those platforms. You have to like find some other place where people can talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's trying to get that balance as well, to try and get new listeners, but at the same time not isolate old listeners by incessantly, promoting and asking people to review. Because of course, if you review, then supposedly Apple Podcast will put you up the rankings. But yeah, for podcasting, for writing, it's just this wild game. And as you say, they're pushing people like Joe Rogan, who we know he really needs to expand his audience. So thank God that they're doing that.
And I know that everybody can say, because there's musicians out there listening to this and saying, well, it's the same thing in the world of music. They're going to push the artists who they already know are huge. And so you are trying to find a way to go big on what? On YouTube? Like, someplace where you've, where separately people can talk about your music, but it's not, it's not like the old days where it's just in your region. You're going to be able to like play small venues or whatever. You're hoping that your song will become a hit on TikTok. Like that was the thing with TikTok. You'll have some snatch of 15 seconds of a song that may be obscure and maybe from somebody who, and then tries to cash in on that. But the process by which you find your fans and the people that will love your music, it changes from year to year. And everything about how entertainment works, everything that you watch, everything that you consume, it's all based on these companies trying to decide what to feed you. So if, again, there's people who are confused why somebody like me spends 85% of my time and energy promoting on social media and then 15% writing and editing the books. It's like, there's no natural mechanism for people to just find your book. It doesn't work like that. That you have to separately go out and then find people on a social media platform who are not there to find books necessarily and reach them that way. And you're almost doing an end around. But everything you consume has gone through some kind of a filter like that. It's the same thing, on YouTube, and you have a piece of software that's trying to predict what you're going to want to watch, and they may be pushing again some right-wing anti-vax documentary on you because they've decided you're the right demographic. But behind the scenes, there's an ocean of creators jockeying to figure out, how can I get YouTube to show my video to people that don't already follow me? Like, how do I get them to show it to new people? And it's just kind of a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, of course, talking about promoting things, one of the reasons that we're having this conversation, mentioning it now almost an hour in, is because of my new book, Daddy's Boy. I've got these kind of series of tangential conversations. So, first of all, should have done this at the start, but thank you for providing such a wonderful blurb for it.
Yeah, and I try to never turn down. People ask me to give like the blurbs. People are not in the biz. It's where there's a little quote on the back of the book. The only time I don't give it is if I read the book and it turns out it's just terrible, and then I have to like pretend that I didn't get a chance to read it or whatever. But you obviously wrote, you knew it's the exact kind of book that I like, and that I'm the type of thing I'm into, where you start with a premise and then it just becomes absolute nightmarish chaos. And if you've ever had a family member like is described in this book, without spoiling things too much, you will recognize this, where you are by years not the adult in the relationship, but you are actually the adult in the relationship, and you're speaking to a much older person who is the child in your relationship. This people who have had that experience with anyone, be it a father or anyone else, will see their own lives in this very silly amplified version of it. But I'm not any older family members of mine out there. I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about a hypothetical other older person who acts like a child that I've had to maybe deal with, maybe may or may not have. I don't want anybody complaining to me that I'm airing out my grievances. I'm just saying it is a somewhat universal experience, at least for some of us out there.
And I am talking to the people who are like that in my family. You know who you are.
And I mean, before you were saying about, look, unless you've got like a massive budget for advertising, you need to be on those social media platforms. And speaking of which, I mean, for the first time, really, I've started talking about Jeff Bezos. In fact, I've started experimenting with Amazon ads specifically for Daddy's Boy, because I thought, of all the books that I've written, this is the one that's kind of hardest to put in a neat genre. And also, if you were, it's a little bit outside, the horror genre and what I've done before. So I started doing Amazon ads, and a lot of people recommended to go for the automated ad campaigns. But Amazon algorithms, they don't know where to put Daddy's Boy. It is an absolute mystery to them. So, I mean, the closest to the audience I've got is when it pushes it to people who are searching for horror comedy. Okay, there could be some crossover there, but I've seen it pushed anything with daddy in the title, from, erotica to children's books. And it just seems to be baffling for the Amazon algorithms to even know what to do with it. So I would say that I've had limited success with that so far, probably more emphasis on limited rather than success. But is that something that you've experimented with yourself, the Amazon advertising, or do you
In the
just
past, in the past, there's no platform, there's no ad platform I've not tried at some point to see if I sold enough books to make it worth it. Whether you're talking about Google AdSense at one time, and you used to be able to buy space on Goodreads. I've done all of them. None of them have really worked that well for me. I don't think to the point where it seemed like the amount I was spending versus the number of books I was selling. But for example, the book that I was promoting last time I was on here, I'm starting to worry about this Black Box of Doom that got flagged as science fiction everywhere for mysterious reasons. That was not how the publisher sent it out. That was not in like the metadata of the stuff we pushed out. Some reason it got tagged with that on Goodreads and Amazon and in some bookstores chains. They have it in the science fiction section. There's no spaceships. It doesn't take place in the future. There's no robots. There's no sci-fi in this. But maybe the title, something about it sounded sci-fi. Maybe some random intern just flagged it as that at some early stage, and then it got pushed down to all these other platforms because nobody really cares. And I'm not a nobody. This is a Macmillan release. Like, I'm a best-selling New York Times best-selling author. I've had books get turned into movies. You would think that, wow, this guy's a big shot. He could just pick up the phone and tell Mr. Amazon, hey, fix it. No. You can't. That's none of us can. It doesn't. If you get to where you're big enough to do that, it's some level above me, apparently. So this is, writers will always feel like peasants, I think, to some degree in any process. And when you're trying to promote, you're trying to get people to buy it, you're trying to get stores to stock it or whatever. Because, for example, you don't find my books at Target or Walmart for the most part. You're not going to find them at the grocery store. I'm not one of those authors. I'm not James Patterson. You're not going to go to Kroger and then next to the meat section, there's, a bunch of his books. That's not me. So all of these things you try to do to promote, they always treat it like, okay, you're just some weirdo trying to publish their manifesto. No matter how big you get, I think, unless you're a superstar, then you're, I don't know. It's almost like I'm not saying they're not trying to sell your book, but they're not trying super hard to sell your book. It's kind of like either your book is already popular or you're just bothering us. And so I don't know. There's some, like on my Kindle screen, when it goes into sleep mode, it shows an ad, and it's always for some book, and a lot of times it is some like self-published, like a $2.99 ebook, and I just always think, man, what did the author pay for that? Like, is it working for them? Are they selling a bunch of books this way because they like paid for the Kindle sleep screen, a full screen thing of the cover of their book, and it's like it's I don't know. And every time I look at it, I think, should I be doing that? I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if I could get the publisher to do it, or could I do it out of pocket? I have no idea. Because again, the way I promote is incredibly inefficient. I've said on videos before that when I do a TikTok video about my book, like specifically with an excerpt or talking about the book, for about every 2,000 views, I'll sell a copy of the book. Like, that's pretty reliable. So if I have a video that does 40,000 views, I'll sell 20 copies of the book. Not 20,000, 20 copies. And then if I have a video that's totally unrelated, just like some video I'm talking about movies or something, I'll sell a copy for about one copy for every million views of the video. So if a video goes super viral, gets 5 million views, I'll sell 5 copies of the book off that. Because what you're talking about, someone on TikTok, is them watching your video, going to your profile, clicking on your links, seeing the list of books, clicking on the Amazon link, reading the description, and thinking, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll go ahead and buy that. That's literally a 1 in a million action on TikTok. Not as bad on Facebook. Facebook, you can actually have a URL that people can click on directly. TikTok, you don't. So, but those are the numbers, and I just work in volume. I just do a video, one or more videos every day, and just through sheer numbers, eventually it all adds up, selling books 5, 10, and 15 and 20 at a time.
Yeah, it's incredible the amount of hours that have to be put in just, to to make a living, because as you say, if you don't, then Herman Melville, Moby Dick, that's kind of not what anybody kind of wants to have happen. And I mean, in terms of the misclassification of books, you spoke about the latest one being put into the sci-fi genre. That kind of thing has happened to me numerous times. So I think I've said before that with They're Watching, that Bob and I wrote together, which is an occult horror book, because there is a dancing scene, it's put into erotica so often. And I don't know what to tell you, but if you read that book hoping to get off, then you are going to be very, very disappointed. And
But readers
equally,
blame you for that because they come
yeah,
in feeling like they
yeah.
were promised something. Like, we can
Mhm.
laugh, but they come in
Mm.
expecting something and they don't get it. They're going to reflect that in their reviews. They're going to hold that against you as to whether or not to buy any of the other books, because it comes off like you misrepresented something. And it's like, no, trust me, I begged them to change it, and they wouldn't return the message. I don't even think anybody checks those messages.
Well, with that one now, so I tried to enroll They're Watching in the Amazon advertising, because I thought, look, this is easier to classify, so maybe I'll have more success. And I basically get an automated message saying, sorry, we can't accept erotica
That's
for
right.
our
Yeah.
advert. It's like, it's not fucking erotica. Please help me and Bob sell our horror books. So, as you say, I could try and contact Amazon, but actually, I'll probably get a kind of, this page doesn't work. So it's just done until Amazon decide to not classify it as erotica, which is probably never. And then with Daddy's Boy, luckily it's not happening often, but occasionally it turns up in the lawyers and political humor section, because there is one reference in, I think, like page 3, where just a character says he's looking to get a loan, and then there's a reply, lawyers and landlords, thieving bastards, the lot of them. And they decided that that was enough to put this in legal and political humor.
Do you think it's using AI to scan the text, because you're uploading the thing to Kindle, so it's got access to the text? Do you think it's using AI to just quickly scan through, and it's looking for keywords? Because what they're trying to avoid, I think they're trying to avoid the author putting their book in like a more popular genre than it actually is. So like, no, we will decide what genre it is. But I wonder if they're just using a bot, just using an AI, just quickly skimming it in a microsecond. It's like, okay, we've detected law, lawyer, whatever. All right, that we're putting next to John Grisham. It's a John
Yeah.
Grisham legal thriller.
Yeah, I think that must be part of it. And I suppose, like, in Amazon's defense, like in the keywords I have made clear, look, this is a dark comedy. And it is, I mean, if I look mostly now, it's in the dark comedy, it's in the dark humor section, it's in horror comedy, it's in horror parodies and satire. So it's in the right ballpark, but just as a kind of third obscure category, it keeps going into lawyers and humor, and it's occasionally in the charts there, I suppose, depending on how the other books that they've possibly falsely put in that category are getting on. But I do think it must be some sort of AI and scanning it, because particularly if you were to take the first 10% of the book, there are references to the legal case, and that there's a legal case for a cat custody battle as well. So, it's got lawyer, it's got solicitor, it's got custody battle. Amazon are like, this is legal humor right here.
You should lean into that. I mean, like if it becomes like, if let's say like a book becomes like a big time bestseller in legal, and it pushes all the other books up, right? And you end up being like number 3 or number 5 or something like that. You mean like currently number 3 in legal thrillers. What the fuck? You could lean into it.
I will lean into it being in the top 3 in any category, to be clear.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you get a big 5 publishing deal or whatever, I'm telling you, got to be the same thing. It does not matter. The platforms are too big and they're too understaffed, and they don't care. They really don't. It's your job to sell it, and even though they supposedly provide tools and all that stuff that, in theory, would make any author be able to like promote their own work on the platform, it's the system is not there for you. It's there for other people.
Well, we've got a question from Patreon regarding pop culture. So this is from Erich, and they say, why does it seem so difficult to write a convincing pop culture reference for a fictional reality, future or otherwise? Like, what would the Hawk Tour joke of the Hunger Games universe be?
Right. And in fact, that's the weirdest thing you'll notice about almost any fictional universe is that they don't have pop culture. Like if you watch the Disney Star Wars show Andor, they have very brief glimpses of like what TV is like in the Star Wars universe, which prior to now was not a thing. The idea that they have media that they watch. It's like, well, what movies does Luke Skywalker watch? And yeah, you actually show him in his room and he's like 20-year-old Luke Skywalker, like playing with like a toy jet because he has no TV to watch and there's no internet. And for the most part, it's because when they try to imitate it, it just looks weird and it doesn't sound convincing. And you try to write like, well, what music would they have in that universe? Or what would opera look like? What would theater look like? And for the most part, they kind of try not to show it. There's that one of the Star Wars prequels where they go to like this opera and there's just like a bunch of bubbles floating around. And it's like, yeah, I can see that's what entertainment is in the alien worlds. They've just got like giant bubbles that float around and make sounds or whatever. But yeah, because what you're trying to do is create something that sounds like the kind of thing other people would be into in this other world. And it's like, well, if I was capable of writing that, I would just write that for our world. If I had a great idea for like a TV show that would convincingly make you say, oh yeah, this would be a huge hit in Metropolis where Batman lives. It's like, well, I wouldn't write that in my Batman story. I would just write that and try to sell that on its own instead of embedding it in this other thing. But that's why. And so usually like in my books, when they are referencing their music and pop culture or whatever, it's always satirical. Like in the Zoe books, it's very big that it's in the future. So when she talks about like the anime that's famous in the future, it's something bizarre. And the joke is that it's bizarre, and everybody understands like everything in that world is exaggerated, everything is very silly, so it's played for laughs. But if I was trying to come up with like what's a fantastic legal drama that people in the future would watch, it's like, well, I wouldn't put that in the book. I would write that legal drama on its own thing. But every time a fictional universe tries to like come up with, well, here's what they watch there, they either don't do it or else what they come up with is not convincing. It's like, well, this wouldn't be, I can't imagine this actually being the music people would listen to. And it's very funny because when you have a movie that's set in the future, their music is always like some kind of electronica or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, but why would that be? Why wouldn't like folk music come back in the year 2100? Like they'll still have guitars. They'll still have like, why would there? It's like, well, no, it's the future. It's got to be like computer noises. It's like, well, yeah, but do you understand that in 2100 that could sound ancient and old fashioned, and the jazz may come back. Music can be timeless. But if you had a show that took place 100 years from now and everybody's listening to like country music, they would think it's a joke. But why? Why wouldn't the steel guitar come back? Why wouldn't the blues come back? There's no reason they couldn't.
Yeah, it's like they would have the same kind of music that we would have because music is based on tones from frequency, and those are kind of like, it's actually physics. If you think about it, it's like your stoner buddy's like, I'm going to invent a new guitar scale. No, you're not. You're stoned. You're not going to do that.
Yeah.
I
And
think
yeah,
that
and there's
I was
some
going to say,
science to it with the music. Like it's imitating the tones of like a human voice. Like the sound of a violin has that
mhm.
effect on your moods because it's like imitating certain vocal ranges or something like that. But it's not, music is not universal across cultures, but it's something that develops simultaneously on opposite sides of the world because it is, it's brain science and things like that. But no, that is an excellent question because the thing that I love to point out is that our fictional heroes don't consume media. And if you ever see them like consuming media, it's portrayed as something very sad. Like in Andor, there's one point when one of the spies, she gets extremely depressed, and the way they show her being depressed is she's like laying on a sofa watching a TV show. And you're like, oh my God, she must be near suicide. She's like just laying there staring at a screen like a zombie. And it's like, okay, well, I've been watching this show for 5 straight hours in this exact same position she's in. But in, it's like in Fight Club, and they showed Edward Norton, he's like totally disconnected from the world, and the way they portray that, he's just like laying on a sofa like a zombie with his remote, like just watching. It's like, man, what a sad, pathetic life this sad bastard lives. He's just staring at the screen for hours at a time in like a zombified state. Wow, can you imagine getting to that low? And like, no, this is what I'm doing right now. But when a movie character does it, you watch any hero, it's like, well, what are the TV shows, Bruce Wayne watches? It's like none. He's working on the Batmobile. What are the TV shows that Tony Stark watches when he's not Iron Man? It's like none. He's not scrolling on his phone. He's working on his dragster. He's improving his space suit. He's fighting somebody. He's at a meeting. He's out at a nightclub. He's out. When they're having fun, they're out doing stuff. They're out with friends. They're gambling. They're drinking. They're never just scrolling on their phone. And if you had a character who was just scrolling on their phone, that would signal like, oh, they're in a dark place. They've, look, this is Bruce Wayne is just there staring at his phone for an hour in a row. You'd be like, my God, the Joker has finally gotten to him. He's just staring at his phone for hours at a time, like I'm doing right now.
The decompression shower. Yeah. And I was thinking, is there any pop culture reference that came from a movie that was a pop culture reference in a film that became something in our film? And the only thing, and I'm sure there's probably a million of them, but the thing that comes to mind is like RoboCop. I'll buy that for $1. That was not anywhere except for RoboCop, which was, it's like if you do like any type of pop culture thing, it has to almost mirror our own pop culture. That's the only way it's going to work within that world.
Yeah, that's a good question because most of the movies about like a band hitting it big, like I know the song from That Thing You Do, the Tom Hanks movie, I know that became a hit on its own. That's rare though. It usually, like the song in the movie that the hero comes up with is going to be the huge hit. I guess the Eminem song from 8 Mile, but if it's a case where it's not a musician being in the movie, but they're coming up with a song, and in the universe of that movie, the song is a huge hit. Usually in real life, the song is just awful. It's the same thing when you're watching a movie about a novelist and he's like an award-winning novelist and they read an excerpt of the novel. It's like, oh, that's the worst thing I've ever. They're like, well, yeah, it's because the screenwriter just trying to sound like an award-winning novelist. They're not actually, but that's a good point because you're like trying to create the second layer of I'm writing something that in this universe is really, really amazing and is a huge hit and has won a ton of awards, but I'm not capable of actually writing something that becomes hugely popular and wins a bunch of awards. So we have to pretend that people's tastes in the fictional universe are much worse than they are in real life.
Yeah. Eddie and the Cruisers comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because that I don't think that song was famous until they actually did it in the film. That's not even Eddie and the Cruisers, but yeah.
What is a piece of pop culture or something that's happening in the world today or that's happened relatively recently that you think future generations or history books will completely get wrong or misunderstand?
Ooh, that's a real good question. Because, for example, the Bible is full of pop culture references that we have no freaking idea what they're talking about because it is so long gone. And I think the best example is there's in the book of Revelation about the end of the world, the end times, when one of the horses of the apocalypse is like starvation or whatever, famine. And they say something like, a loaf of bread costs a bag of gold, but don't touch the olives or the grapes. And people were like, what are they talking about? Apparently that's a joke because there was this period where there was a local famine in that region, but because the farmers were growing grapes for wine and olives for olive oil, but it was all getting shipped off to Rome. So they were not able to grow the staple crops for themselves to eat. They were growing stuff to be shipped away for rich people to consume. So in the book of Revelation, when this angel of starvation comes, he's like this Roman official saying, you're all starving, but don't you dare eat the grapes. Those are getting shipped off to make wine to Rome. And it's like a joke. It's satire, but it's that context is so lost because it's 2,000 freaking years ago that now it's just mysterious or it's just ominous. But it's like, well, no, that was supposed to be funny. He's parodying what's going on right now. People at the time would have gotten it, but now it's been lost. That's interesting because especially now, so much of what we're doing, there's a layer of like irony or sarcasm, and there's so little just genuine like sincerity, just straight ahead, especially in like the Marvel movies era and the way we do our sitcoms and all that. If you try to watch an episode of Rick and Morty, that will not hold up. I don't think the way that like the Bugs Bunny cartoons did, where 50 years later you can watch it, because so much of that is riffing on tropes from existing. It's like, hey, we're all sick of this thing that happens in movies and TV shows now, and I can joke about it and make fun of it, and I don't even have to explain what I'm mocking because we all know that this is what I'm riffing on. I'm taking this existing trope and I'm pulling it apart and making fun of it, and subverting your expectations because you're used to this happening in a story, but this is going to happen instead. Well, 50 or 100 or 200 years from now, all of that's going to be lost. So all that's left is like the recognizable format of the story. You have a person and a problem, and they go out and try to solve the problem, and then this happens. So I would be fascinated to know which episodes, not just of that show, but of any show, hold up, because so much of the pop culture is about pop culture. It's not about life. It's about, this is a riff on other movies you've seen. This is a riff on other TV shows, other cartoons you've seen, rather than this is a riff on a familiar situation we've all had to endure at work or in life or in family. Those things are timeless. But if the thing you're making is actually just a twist on, look, we're all sick of these Marvel movies, so here's a thing that is a riff on those Marvel movie tropes. It's like, yeah, but that's going to be forgotten. I don't know. Because for a long time, I grew up with some media that was riffing on it. Like when I saw Blazing Saddles, I did not have decades of watching Westerns to know that each and everything that happens in Blazing Saddles is a riff on people who were sick of Westerns. They had been watching Westerns their whole lives. Hollywood used to release 20 Westerns a week. Like it was just inundated. And so every single thing that happens with the sheriff, and then the twist with the sheriff being black, and every single scene in that movie is riffing like, some trope that we're now sick of. As a kid, I just saw it as a bunch of wacky people in the desert screwing around. And when somebody fell down, I would laugh. When somebody farted, I would laugh. But I didn't have any of the context for what he was making fun of. And then all of the other pop culture stuff that was, layered on top of that. So I don't know. You could say that Blazing Saddles holds up really well. I think it's really interesting to think about if you go even further into the future, because, for example, I don't know if you took a Gen Z kid and showed them Blazing Saddles, would they get anything from it? There are certain moments that I'm sure are kind of universal, but even like some of the racial humor, the context is totally different now. You don't realize how kind of taboo a lot of the stuff they were referencing was at the time.
Yeah, I think also that if you showed it to kids now, I think my dad could relate, because I know growing up, it seemed like literally right before the Creature feature, every Saturday there was a Western on. There were more Westerns made worldwide, most of them in Hollywood, but all over the world, than any other genre of film ever made. There are Westerns that you could watch one a day. You could watch 10 a day, and you probably wouldn't watch them all in 10 years.
You cannot go to IMDb and just look up the list of how many movies John Wayne was in. He would 5 movies a year. Like, they would just knock these suckers out. It is hard to overstate to kids how ubiquitous Westerns were in a time when you did not have infinite options for stuff to watch. Like, this was, this is a time when, for a while, theater was the only place to see visual media. And then TV, you had 3 broadcast channels. And yeah, it would be Westerns on all 3. Or maybe there would be a football game and then Western. It is, people complain about like the saturation of superhero stuff for the last, 20 years or whatever. Nothing compared to how Westerns dominated for decades. This went on for a long time.
It's refreshing now to actually see a Western, because we grew up with them, and then it was all superhero, and Star Wars and Star Trek and Jaws and slews of slasher and giallo movies and everything like that. And then you learn about Universal and Hammer Films, and then somebody makes a really cool Western called The Proposition, and you're like, oh fuck, this is a Western with Guy Pearce, and they all in Australia. I'm fucking down. This is the shit right here. It's refreshing to see things like that now.
Side note, that movie that Alec Baldwin was making, the Western where the woman was tragically shot and killed because of the grossly irresponsible handling of the firearm. Apparently the movie's pretty good.
I've heard the same.
I don't know what to say about it. Apparently, it's like this. The tragedy is actually a pretty competent movie, and have been recognized as a decent Western, gritty Western that people could have just enjoyed if not for this incredibly irresponsible thing that they had done. Anyway, just a side note. Rust is the name of the movie. Apparently pretty good. I've not paid to see it. Feels wrong. Apparently all the money is being sent to like the victims. That's why they released the movie, because they wanted to like pay for the departed cinematographer that was killed. But anyway, apparently it's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to that.
I don't know the morality of giving money to, because again, you are enriching the people who did the terrible thing, but whatever.
But you said that a lot of the money is going to...
That's why it was released, because otherwise they would have just ditched it would have been incredibly tasteless to just release movies like, hey, still, otherwise. But no, it's because I guess that was part of the wishes of the family, and I think that's the profits are being channeled to. Please Google that before you go see the movie. And again, I realize you're still also helping like Alec Baldwin become more famous if you think that he should be in jail for that. But anyway, just point out the idea is that there was a time when that would have been like a huge release, because like Western pretty good, got some famous people in it, and whereas now it's like that's a rare thing, because people got sick of them about, I don't know, guess it would have been the early 80s or late 70s when right after the spaghetti Westerns kind of came and went, that people were like, all right, that's enough of the Westerns.
Yeah, I mean it's such a kind of almost gray area with the release of that in terms of morally what the right thing is to do. Because if you go and support it, I suppose that the victims' families get money, but at the same time, there's something that it feels dirty to go and see it. So
And occasionally Mel Gibson will release a movie and people are like, that's actually really good. Like, I don't know. Am I supposed to be giving him money? I don't know. I don't, but I suspect there's a lot of people like him in Hollywood. It's just they didn't get caught being as loud as he was. But in terms of people who are secretly like anti-Jew or whatever, I actually think that's probably more common than we think. It's just that they did not get drunk and get pulled over by the cops.
Mm-hmm. I will always like The Road Warrior and The Road Warrior 2 and Thunderdome. And I own those movies on Blu-ray because I wanted to support George Miller.
Yeah, and guess what? Those are westerns. They're just set in the future. But the same thing with like the stranger who comes to town. Like Thunderdome is, stranger wanders into town, finds out the town's under the thumb of some local bad guy, and he's been tasked with having to take this guy down. And then that's all. It's just westerns. They just changed the aesthetic for people who are kind of sick of westerns. The Walking Dead, also a western. They took what would have been the Cherokee and replaced them with zombies. And I realize that's terrible and politically incorrect, but that's exactly what they did. The zombies played the exact same role that the Indians would have whenever there's a plot point and you're trying to get from A to B and we got to get to this place because we got a sick child and the medicine's at this fort. But oh my God, we're being swarmed by blank. And we've got to fight them off, and we don't care if they get shot, and they're not portrayed as being human because they're just obstacles to keep us from getting from here to there. The exact same format, exact same plot. You'll have some flamboyant warlord who is keeping a small group, a town of people under their thumb. That's all Western stuff. They just changed it from the Old West to the future, but having a world where there's not any like civilization and it's kind of lawless. It's just a way to reuse all of your Western plots.
well, to kind of wrap up, I mean, for people who want to include pop culture references in their fiction or in films that they're writing, do you have any do's and don'ts that we haven't covered yet when it comes to writing about pop culture?
Write the stuff that you care about, whether it's about this or anything else, the stuff you're passionate about, the stuff you can speak intelligently about. So if you're making an observation about it, or you're making a joke about it, know what you're talking about. The stuff that you can make fun of the best is the stuff that you love. And it's the stuff that or if you hate it, you are hating it from a place of, I've seen a lot of it and I understand it or whatever. But be authentic, and then the rest will take care of itself. Because even if you're making a reference that is incredibly obscure that nobody's going to get, they will detect your authenticity, your passion, the fact that the other things you're saying that comes across that what you're talking about, or that you're interesting in your review of these things, and it will make them want to go look it up. And there's been many times when I have discovered an author or a filmmaker or a band from reading about them in a novel where a character in that novel is a huge fan of whatever. And then it makes me want to go look it up because the way they describe it, the way they talk about it is interesting. The way they joke about it is interesting. And so it becomes a vector for people to go find the stuff but don't try to fake it. You don't need to. Talk about the stuff that you like. And no matter how nerdy it is, if you're really into the weird anime stuff, then make the references to your weird anime stuff, but make it clear why you find it interesting, and make it compelling. And then people will find it interesting no matter what, whether they can relate to it or not.
And of course, you mentioned before that with each video, with each podcast you appear on, that there's a very small percentage of people that then go and buy your books. So, for the small percentage that will buy a book off the back of listening to this, what is the book that you want them to buy?
Let me ask you this. When does this episode go up?
So this will go up Kind of the start of June, I think, would be
Okay,
fair.
the book is
Yeah.
$3. I'm starting to worry about this Black Box of Doom. It is $2.99 in ebook form for the month of June 2025. If you're listening to this after that, you probably missed it, and it is back to its normal outrageous price. But we're doing a month-long $2.99 sale in ebook form. Any ebook format, that is the price books should always be, in my opinion. But right now, I think it's like $17 in ebook form. It's like 85% off or whatever, but only for the month of June. If you're listening to this in the month of June, if you have any doubt about whether or not I can actually write a book for a quarter of a cup of coffee now, a cup of coffee at Starbucks is like $12. This book is $3. Give it a shot. You are risking nothing.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts to leave our listeners and viewers with?
Other than if they're small creators, whether they are podcasters or whatever, please take the time to try to support them if you can spare the money. If they have Patreons or they have Substacks or whatever, please, this media environment, all of the money flows to the very, very, very top. So there's a few Substack essayists who make millions and millions of dollars. There's a few authors who make tens of millions of dollars. There's a few podcasters who make hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, if you follow one of the small time guys, people that are a little bit more niche, if they ask you to subscribe, they ask you to spend the $3 or whatever to join their Patreon, to join their Substack. It is, that money goes further than you can possibly imagine. All of these people are trying to scrape together a following of a few hundred or a couple thousand people that will let them actually do it as a job. It means the world. And in terms of where you can spend your money, in a world where people will spend, will send $100 at a time to some OnlyFans model, please send it instead to the people who you listen to on your podcast or whatever. It means everything.
All right. Well, thank you again for the Daddy's Boy blurb, and thank you for joining us.
And thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to This Is Horror Podcast. If you enjoy the show and want to support us, then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thisishorror. You'll get early bird access to each and every episode, and you can submit questions to the interviewee. You'll also automatically become a member of the This Is Horror Discord. And every year, there are bonus episodes for patrons only, such as Story Unboxed, the horror podcast on the craft of writing, in which Bob and I, and sometimes a special guest, will dissect a short story or film and let you know writing lessons and takeaways to improve your own writing. Another great way to support us is to leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app or website. And if you want to watch the video version of the This Is Horror podcast, join us on YouTube, youtube.com/@thisishorrorpodcast. You can subscribe there and get notified every time there is a new video. And however you support us, I thank you in advance. Okay, before I wrap up, a quick advert break.
Cosmovorous, the debut cosmic horror novel by R.C. Housen, is now available as an audio experience. Featuring an original dark synthwave score, this story will take you to the next level of terror. Come hear the story that readers are calling Barker Meets Lovecraft, a phantasm-style cosmic horror adventure, and a full-bore, unflinching, nihilistic nightmare. Cosmovorous, the audiobook by R.C. Housen. Come listen if you dare.
What if the end of the world didn't come with a bang, but with a breach? In the Infernal Age, Demongate, a failed experiment destroys all technology, killing millions, and opens a gateway to something far worse. Demons now roam the earth, and humanity's only hope lies in adapting to the ashes of a broken world. If you love the creeping dread of the mist, the poignant grit of the road, and the dark humor of the cabin in the woods, you'll feel right at home in this post-apocalyptic blend of horror and sci-fi. The Infernal Age, Demongate, is available now on Amazon, Audible, and bookshop.org. Step to the gate if you dare.
Well, that about does it for another episode of This Is Horror. Next time we will be talking to John Basoff, the author of The Memory Ward, amongst other things. And recently we are really bringing our A-game to the This Is Horror YouTube. So if you're not a subscriber already, please head to www.youtube.com/@thisishorrorpodcast. So at the time of recording, we just put up the episode with Jasper Bark on dark comedy, and the episode with Brian Asman on writing fiction fearlessly. And in about 24 hours, the episode with Sophia Asram will be going live. So plenty of good things going on over there. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. So I'd love it if you could make that happen by the end of the month, or even better, by the end of the week. So on that note, I'll see you next time with John Basoff. But take care of yourselves, be good to one another, read horror, keep on writing, and have a great day.
This is Horror Podcast.